So you're back in here, which means that you're the suckers that have to deal with me for another hour. No, thank you for coming back. So this talk is going to stray a little bit from the Warriors Not Winners, but what you'll see is a ton of similarities between what we talked about earlier and what we're going to talk about now is how do we as coaches, administrators, even parents, create this environment that's centered around the athletes. And I use child-centered because I do a lot of work in positive discipline in the classroom with parents, and actually just created tool cards for coaches from that realm, and they all talk about child, and so that's why I use that term. It's because I want to get us away from the idea of athlete-centered, because a lot of us use that term, and then what happens is we see the kids only as athletes, and we forget that they're these human beings that bring more to the table than just the sport experience itself, and we have to deal with everything they bring to the table, as well as we have to deal with what we bring to the table. So before we get started, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the 3 myths that are destroying youth sports. And again, I'm kind of preaching to the choir because you're not dealing with those myths as much now, because for about 10 years you've been addressing those myths. But some of the sports, the one I come from, for instance, we're deadlocked in the middle of these, and we're refusing to sort of see them. We're being like a little kid, or the lizards, when they are threatened, they close their eyes. Or a little kid is like, I don't want to see it. We're looking away and not paying attention. Talk about the myths, and then we'll talk about ways as coaches, parents, administrators, that we can dispel those myths and create this athlete/child-centered environment. Before we get started, who thinks they know what those myths are? The 3 myths that are just absolutely destroying youth sports. Anyone? Bueller? Cost? Oh yeah, $15 billion industry, right? Commitment? Yes. And commitment is, so both of those are embedded in 2 of the myths. So yeah, you're dead on. All right, let's jump in and see. Just wanted to get a couple people to start to think about it. What are these myths that he's going to talk about? Because they're plainly obvious once we toss them up there, and you all go, oh my goodness, why didn't I see that? First things first, 7 out of 10 kids are quitting youth sports by the age of 13. That number hasn't changed in 3 or 4 years. It's still there, and we talked about it earlier. Only lacrosse and hockey are the 2 sports that aren't just, their attrition rate is far outpacing their matriculation rate, the sign-ups, right? Other sports are talking about the fact that they have more kids leaving the sport than they have signing up. 7 out of 10. Here's the problem. The brain continues to evolve in children. It continues to grow and develop well into their 20s. So we're missing the opportunity from 13 on to actually help create these excellent human beings when they leave the sport that early. And being a former high school coach and actually working with college athletes and everything like that, and some of you who works with the older kids, older than age 13, you're missing that chance. We're not even giving you the kids, so you don't even have a chance to put into them these skills and the values and give them a positive role model to want to follow. They're leaving before we get that chance, okay? Who knows where they're going? It was our lunch conversation with our table. Where are they going? Good. Well, I heard somebody say it. We'll get to that, and we'll talk about the epidemic. Before we get started, it's not just sports. This doesn't just kill me because it's sports. I've got a 19-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old. They've all quit sports. They quit because of bad coaches. They quit because of bad experience. They quit because of pressure. Even me, I sit up here and talk about this stuff. I put the same, even verbal pressures on my kids, not even knowing I did it. They quit for those reasons. And I looked in the mirror a couple times driving with my kids, and I got teary-eyed because I realized it wasn't the sport that I was so sad that they were driven away from. It's the other piece of the puzzle.
I probably would make a time machine.
I would make medicine for the sick.
I'd probably invent something new.
我会赢到5个总冠军戒指。
If I could have an extra 5 years to live.
You said 5, right?
5 years. It's a long time.
I would try to fix everything I did bad.
I would bring my uncle back because I miss him very much.
I would get more hamsters.
I would probably want to go looking for dark matter.
I think I'd go looking for aliens.
If I could live an extra 5 years. I was thinking about making like a helicopter, like a wooden helicopter, but I don't have any wood.
I want to go check out the moon sometime.
I'd probably teach my sister not to hate tuna.
I would try and invent a machine that lets you run at light speed. If I had 5 more extra years to live, I would be the boss of all the chipmunks. Eu cantaria na frente de 1 milhão de pessoas. I don't really know. I think I'd do anything. Why are you asking me that?
Our friends at Design to Move put that video together to make a point to us. Because these kids, they didn't do anything, but they're going to lose 5 years. And it's because they didn't do anything, but it's because of what we've done as the adults in the youth sports situation that have driven in front of it. And I would look in the rearview mirror and I'd look at my kids and I'd think, they're the first generation to not, lifespan-wise, outlive a generation prior to it. Our kids are going, or that generation is potentially going to die 5 years younger than us, and it's the first time ever. We've always extended the lifespan. And they're saying the reason is childhood obesity and the body is a machine that was meant to move. When you don't use the body, not just the obesity piece, but when you don't use the body like a machine, just like a machine, if it sits on a shelf, it starts to fade. The more you use it, the better you are at keeping that machine well-oiled and moving. But our kids are leaving sports. And back to why they're leaving sports. What are they going to? Video games. I don't know about you, but my kids play video games. There's not a whole lot of cardiovascular work done there. There's not a lot of VO2 max exchange happening. There's not a lot of movement at all. My kid's got the world's strongest thumbs. He can bench press 180 with just his thumbs, but he's not getting the other pieces of the puzzle. He's also not getting the socialization. If they're on their apps or on their video games, it's a different world. He says, oh, I talk to my friends all the time online. It's different. You're not face-to-face. You're not reading facial expressions, understanding body language, figuring out what a person's saying that's unsaid. They don't, the millennials and below, don't have the skill sets to even read people in situations and understand human emotion that comes off a face, because any communication they do is via text or chat in a video game. 5 years. So we started talking about, well, what are these myths that are out there in youth sports so that we can dispel those myths and create an environment that makes kids want to come to it, because that's why video games and apps are beating us. The kids leave us to play video games because guess who's not in the video game? Us. My son plays video games because there are no adults saying, oh, wait. I don't know why you're perched on that ledge. The ledge from the north is much better, son, so let's move your little character over. We don't tell them those things. We don't stand over their shoulders. We don't tell them. Also, video games don't tell them what to do. Guess what the video game makers started doing years ago? They asked the kids what they want. I got a little creeped out about this in the beginning. My son was telling me that he was getting surveys from the video game makers and answering them. I said, well, that's a little weird. They shouldn't be contacting you. But what they were doing is they were asking, what do you want next? What do you want this game to look like? And each game evolves based on what the kids want. Look at Fortnite. Taking the world by storm, it keeps evolving. And my son says, we give suggestions and then they come out in the next evolution. Like the video game makers are listening to us and building what we want. And I know for a fact that they're actually building what the kids want, because I don't know of any of us adults who would ever want to return to the pixelated world that we had of Pong on Atari. And yet, what is Minecraft? Like, that is absolutely pixelated. I could not wait until I got a video game or computer that had better resolution. Like, I'm there with my 4K HD TV, like, look at the grass blades in this golf course, son. And my son's like, I got a little pixelated guy and he's building things with wood. That's what they wanted. They wanted that experience, so the video game makers made it. If I'm a coder and I've honed my skills, the last thing I want to do is put out something with pixels in it, and yet that's what they did. This blocky-headed character that walks around in this pixelated world. They're listening to the kids. They're doing what the kids want to create an environment that makes the kids want to come back regularly and spend, like I said, $10 to buy a dance move by some character on a video game. I'm like, son, really? $10 to buy V-Bucks just so you can have your character make a dance move? Really? You can do that in real life. Here, let's put on music, right? So what are these myths that are driving them out of sports, and yet for some reason they're not prevalent in video games? Myth number one, the push for early specialization. Right? Right? You see it. Yeah. Come on, son. Strengthen that wrist. Drive through the ball. Come on, get it across the net. It's a funny picture, but it's true. We have pushed our kids in this land grab battle, coming from soccer especially, to grab so many kids that we can for our clubs and to pull them away from the other sports, or to battle the other sports so they don't play in those, or guilty as charged, so I make a living, that we want to get them playing year-round for us, that we're not giving them the opportunity to play other sports, right? And to learn the other skills, or to learn or do any other activities. I was a soccer coach, and at one point I was a director of coaching. Part of my contract was obviously a stipend, but the club couldn't afford to pay me my full contract unless I, guess what, coach teams year-round. That's how I made my money. So one, I said, wait a minute, if I'm coaching 5 teams a season, then only those 5 teams are getting my attention. So the coaches and players on the rest of those teams, they're not getting any help from me, right? So what good does that do? And secondly, I'm trying to grab as many kids as I can year-round because, goodness gracious, I got to make that money so I can feed my family. So guess what, boys? Winter training. It's going to cost you a leg and an arm, but you're going to do winter training with me. And that's what we do. And we tell them that they have to, or we create this fear of missing out for the parents, that they think that's the only way their kid is going to succeed is if they're year-round, if they're specialized in a sport. Conversation I had with a parent. Really worried that little Sammy is not going to make the high school team, okay, and have that opportunity to play at the highest levels, and may not make his dream of making the U.S. team, national team someday, because he wants to play basketball in the winter. But the thing is we're winter training year-round, and if he takes some time off of soccer, he's going to miss out on that time with the team in futsal and in indoor soccer, and his touches are going to fall far behind, and his technical and tactical abilities are going to fall far behind the other kids, and he's not going to be as athletic as the other kids who played soccer in the winter instead of basketball. Your kid's 8. 8. Trust me, he won't fall behind. In fact, basketball actually helps him. It helps lend to it. But see, the parents have these conversations because they're made to believe, we are as adults made to believe that if they miss something, they miss out on that one training session, if they miss out on the winter season, that they're not going to be good enough to keep up with the other kids, or they're going to miss that opportunity at a scholarship. And what's really interesting is those scholarships, those recruiters. You may not be able to see it. This is the Big Ten. I'm in Big Ten country, thank goodness. I was not a couple weeks ago. I was in Pac-12 country or whatever. If you see what the Big Ten is recruiting, multi-sport athletes make up 83% of the kids that were recruited in, I think it was 2014 in the Big Ten. Multi-sport athletes, 83.7%. Over in the SEC, 81.6. There's one person who's been in one of the big sports that's been in both of those conferences, Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer, when he was at University of Florida, recruited multi-sport athletes. He gets to Ohio State, what's he talking about all the time? I want my players that come in and do other things. You've all seen the famous graph curve of the number of kids that he recruited that were, yes. Well, when we were at University of Florida in the spring, they'd put out their upcoming roster, and they'd have kids come in during spring and summer and train and all that. And so the incoming freshmen, you got to see them listed on the roster. All of them had ATH next to them. Athlete, 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 athlete. He had no idea where they were going to play. He didn't care yet. Percy Harvin played for the Minnesota Vikings. May Still, one of the best athletes I've ever seen play the game. He was at University of Florida. He was listed as an athlete. So was Tebow. And when he got there, the reason Tebow won a Heisman, too, was because Tebow had this great cast of characters that also helped. They said, I'll tell you what, Tim, you're going to be the quarterback. Percy, why don't you play an H-back? So-and-so, why don't you play the tight end? These guys were athletes first. He just put them where their talents were most easily utilized in that situation. And the strength and conditioning coach at University of Florida started doing things that were more about athletics than it was about lifting hard weights in the weight room. He was flipping tires and doing strongman competitions and all kinds of other stuff. So these kids had these building blocks as athletes. Well, let's go to a world level because I get this all the time. Well, Lionel Messi. See, he specialized, and look at him. Not quite. You see, the original belief behind the academies in Europe, Borussia Dortmund and Barcelona and all those academies that are over in Europe, they were sport clubs, not football clubs, sport clubs. They played all the sports. And people went and lived there and learned and played the different sports. It's just football's what gave them money and made them famous. But when Johan Cruyff, one of the greatest soccer players and coaches to ever grace the earth, was at Barcelona, he used to get upset when he found out his younger athletes at the academy at La Masia were not doing other sports because they should be. because it gives them building blocks. He also got upset when they were hanging out in the windows or hanging in the dorm rooms instead of free playing, because he said they should be playing anything and everything in their free time. They shouldn't be just focused on soccer and hanging out. Let them play as many sports as they can and do as much as they can. Women's World Cup team, they won their 3rd World Cup. We still have yet to recognize. We keep saying, when are we going to win our first World Cup? They've won 3. They've also had 3 or 4 Player of the Year, right, Balloon d'Ors, and they've had 2 Coaches of the Year worldwide, FIFA, I believe. When they won their last World Cup, 13 sports were played amongst those women. 13 growing up. Mia Hamm could have played Division I basketball. She said she decided it was time to play just soccer. Coming out of high school, 18 years old, that's when she finally decided it was time to specialize. She said the reason she's so good in the air, which if you've ever seen her play, she's an absolute phenom in the air, was because she learned to be good in the air from basketball. Basketball. One of these young ladies in here played 8 different sports growing up. That's an expensive and very tired household, or a very broken, very tired household, right? But she played 8 different sports growing up. So they blow the myth of, oh, to play at the highest levels, you have to play one sport. But let's go to your sport for a minute. Who is arguably the greatest goal scorer of all time in the NHL? Wayne Gretzky, maybe, right? Guess what else Wayne played? He played lacrosse and hockey. And he used to say that his favorite time of year was when the fall would happen, or when the season would change, because he knew he put down one stick for another. And they always say, how do you score so many goals? And he said, I just know the right place to be at the right time. And one of the ways he learned that is because he took the puck on us, basically like a 1D or 2D plane, and he put it up into 3D plane when it was suddenly in the air and moving in different ways. He doesn't just on the ice anymore. He's watching the lacrosse ball and trying to figure out where it's going to go, and where people on the lacrosse pitch are going to move. So that he attributes playing multiple sports to being this great athlete. But again, let's go back to the 5 years younger thing. Here's the biggest issue with specialization in our children. They're not getting the building blocks to survive life. It was the it was Ottawa Senators strength coach who said, I've got professional, 30-year-old, highly paid, $1 million athletes who can't even throw a ball because they don't have that skill in their arsenal, because they weren't given that growing up, right? I, in graduate school, played softball. I was a jock. I went to get a master's in sports psychology. It was basically jock school, right? And I'm with all these other jocks, right? I'm with a hockey player who played at, I can't remember the name of the school right now, but and I was with a skater from Miami, and Miami synchronized skating team is one of the top synchronized skating teams in the world. She'd been skating since the day she could walk. This girl could do the triple sow cows and the blah, 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 everything. She could land any jump. She's a phenomenal athlete. We go to play softball. First time she goes to throw a ball, we all go, what are you doing? She's like, I've never done anything but skate on ice. This is a girl who can skate and land a jump on this very thin blade of metal on a very dynamic surface, and yet she couldn't do the simple skills that are required to play softball. Wasn't her fault, right? I talked to Dean Creelars, who's up in Canada. He's one of the world experts on physical literacy, the idea of giving our kids, just like reading, the skills they need to succeed physically in life. And he said, it's like this, Reed. When we get our young kids and we put them in multiple sports, let's compare it to kids that don't play multiple sports and specialize very early, like our little guy back there that I had up on playing ping pong. It's like Legos. The kids in multiple sports, we give you a bucket of Legos. Kid in a single sport, we give you 1 or 2. And at some point in time in their life, we ask them to build something beautiful out of that. The ones with a bucket are going to be able to build something very beautiful, very creative, and have all the flexibility they need. If you only get a couple Legos, you're probably going to break a few just trying to build it the way you want it to look, right? And we see that. And you don't have the rest of the building blocks to build what you need. And that's when at some point in time you reach a certain point where your body can't do what you're asking of it because it doesn't have those skills. And female athletes are the great example of this. We have all these knee injuries in female athletes. And everybody wants to say, it's the Q angle, the angle of the hips, and it's the femoral arch, and it's this, and it's that. And they want to blame genetics or they want to blame biology for it. It plays a very minor role. But Dean says, if biology were truly the case as to why we have so many torn ACLs in our elite level female athletes, then they would tear both knees. But they don't. We get the female athletes who tear the right knee 3 times. Why? Overuse injuries. She's not balanced. She wasn't getting the physical literacy she needed growing up. And it's as simple as how to jump and land correctly, how to run and stop correctly, how to cut correctly. And when kids aren't taught these very simple skills that at a very small age they're taught to crawl and hop and skip and all those other things that they're supposed to be doing in all the different sports, then they start shearing ACLs and things because the body develops differently and doesn't give them that ability. Or we haven't taught them the ability of how to land without creating impact to the joints. So early specialization, out the window. The science says that it's not what works. And you just saw the draft. I believe the NFL draft was the one where they said it was like 90% of the draftees in the first round or something crazy were all multi-sport athletes. So that myth is busted. Focus on outcomes and not process. We talked about commitment, right? Outcomes and not process. And I talked a little bit about this, and I touched on it, but then I realized I was telling the story here, so I didn't want to go too far in it. We as adults are the ones ranking, and again, when I say this, I'm not blaming you personally, but I am blaming myself because I did this. I was the one logging on to see where my kids were ranked on Got Soccer at 12 years old. How are we only 6th in the nation? We just went to that tournament where we won all those games, and we should have gotten a boatload of points for that. This is ridiculous. 12 years old. Do we really know where the next superstar is coming at 12 years old? Wow. But that's what I felt. As an adult, I'm going to rank them. As an adult, I'm going to tell them that they've got to win as many trophies as they can because look here, if they win trophies, my club looks good. And if my club looks good, more kids want to come to my club. And if more kids want to come to my club, money, money, money. Yeah, right? We get driven by the $15 billion industry when it's the soft drink companies telling us what's what. The technology companies telling us what's what. The companies that don't have anything to do directly with sport are the ones driving the business. And it's okay. I'm like everybody else. I want to make a buck and make a living, but at the expense of what? See, our children, and I talked about this, and I'll get back to it. This guy goes to a Zen monk and he says, I want to be Zen. I want to be like you. I want to be that guy. So people point at me and go, he's Zen. I want to get there. What would it take and how long to study with you so that I could be Zen, so I can get to what you are doing with your life? And the monk says, 10 years. He says, hey man, I got weekends free. I'll come every weekend. Leave work on Friday, spend all the time till Sunday evening, drive back into the city, go back to work on Monday, for as long as it takes to get to Zen. He says, oh, 20 years. The guy says, well, what about this? I got a nice nest egg, been in the good business. What if I quit my job and I come and stayed with you at the temple and we just did Zen and I was your understudy and you taught me everything you know and I worked as hard as I could to get there. Day and night, 24/7. How long would it take then? And he says, 30. And the guy says, wait. Every time I tell you I'm going to try harder to get to Zen, you tell me it's going to take longer. And he says, my student, your first lesson. You see, because when you have one eye on the goal, you only have one eye on the path. And I love that one, and I always pull this picture from a mountain path in China. What you can't see is that's a couple 1,000-foot drop. They use the chain to keep balance, and they walk that path. Would you do that? There is no way. I'm afraid of heights, for one thing. There is no way I'd walk that path. And yet, when we get into sports and we start focusing on outcomes so much that our kids know their own stats, they know where their team is ranked, they know where they're ranked personally, nationally, and all these other pieces of the puzzle, but they don't understand the process behind it, what happens is those kids are put right in the middle of that path. I said it earlier. They have so many other things to deal with, so the social aspects of the sport, trying to deal with friends, trying to deal with emotions, trying to deal with pressures from the parents and coaches and referees and the other team and everything else, that they're walking that path, and when all they can think about is where they're going to be when they arrive or what they're going to get when they arrive, it's real easy to step off that path. And when a child steps off that path emotionally and psychologically, we see burnout. We see them quit. And children have warning signs, but they can't tell us how they feel. So a lot of times they say things like, I don't feel well, or it just doesn't feel right. When a child is saying that, when they don't want to go to practice, and my son says, I don't feel well tonight for the 3rd night in a row, he's sending alarms to me saying, Dad, I need help here. We somehow missed the focus on them. And I'll tell you a story. The biggest mistake I ever made in the way I spoke to my own son. See, I was a goal scorer when I played. I know you can't tell now, but I was a goal scorer when I played. And my mentor got me into coaching at 16 and is still around coaching. And so by the time my son was old enough to play, my mentor was still coaching at the club where I coached. Really cool. But not for my son. Because I told the fish stories, and then my mentor would tell the fish stories, and they would get even bigger. All of a sudden, I scored from midfield one time, which I did actually, but time was running out, and the goalie was pulled, and it dribbled in. We didn't tell him that. My mentor's like, oh, I was upper 90 from 80 yards away. Your dad had a rocket for a leg. You know, we told all the goal scoring stories of my life. And I taught goal scoring. It was one of my things. I'd do these clinics for scoring more goals. I called them Score More. So I taught all that stuff. So my son starts saying, oh my gosh, I want to be like Dad. I want to score goals. Well, my son goes through a year drought where he never scores a goal. The kid had the worst luck on the planet. I remember he got behind the goalie one time and kicked the ball. He's like 8 years old, and it's going towards the goal, and it hits a thing of mud and just stops on the line. And he turns and he's celebrating, and by the time he looks back, the defender has cleared it out. Yeah, it was like that. But see, I was working in the club world, so I was either coaching teams or administrating or at his brother's games. I was not always at all of his games. Guess what's the first question I would ask him when he would come off the field? Did you score? So years go by. My son quit soccer. We're at an amusement park, and he doesn't want to ride any of the rides. That's used to be Dad's favorite thing. Ride the rides, man. Come on, the thrill. This is a kid that when he was in the baby swings, you'd push him, and he'd go away going, no, 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 no. And then when he'd come back, he'd be like, ah. And then, ah. That's how his face looked. We had video of it. I mean, the kid just did not like daredevil things. Wouldn't ride any of the rides. We're leaving that afternoon. I'm walking through the parking lot with him, and he says, stops me dead cold. I remember the exact spot in the parking lot. Dad, am I a disappointment to you? Broke my heart. I had never in my life ever told my son he disappointed me. Never. And I won't. What I didn't know is I had. I said, why would you say that, son? I love you. You're the best. What would make you say that? He says, I'm not a daredevil like you. I don't ride rides. And I'm not a goal scorer like you. So have I disappointed you? His whole being was wrapped up in an outcome because that's all I ever asked him. I just wanted to connect with him. But the way I connected was on outcomes. And he thought that's all that mattered. So we just had to flip the script a little bit. Tell me about your game, son. What do you think about it? And that's hard to do because in our world, it was about outcomes. And we were in an elite club where you got selected, and so you had to have outcomes. So that's what we've learned, is that not only is sport about outcomes, but it's a process. It's all about the process. And we need to teach our children, just like we talked about in the Warrior Talk, being mastery-oriented, process-oriented. Outcomes don't matter because they're going to be positive and negative. They should be. Next one. Sports is an investment, and it sort of lends to the one prior to it. This is a big one. Our parents believe that if little Johnny specializes early, focuses on getting a lot of wins and getting on the very best teams, little Johnny will get a college scholarship, and then the investment is worth it. And how do I know this? Because I know of particular clubs that I've seen around the years at different sports that brag about how many athletes got scholarships at their club. We had 53 kids signed this year. Just signed, didn't say, yeah, scholarships. And they had 2,500 kids. Not great percentages. And what they also don't tell you is how much. So let me think about this. Sports is an investment. If I start at 8 years old with my kid and put my kid in sports for 10 years, and I pay a couple $1,000 a year for him or her to be the very best they can, and they get a scholarship, my money is worth investing. 4%. That's my return. That's my hope at a return. Actually, that's the odds, right? 4%. That's the number of kids that are currently freshmen in high school right now who will get a scholarship. 4%. That number is skewed heavily by the sports that have a lot of scholarships to give, the big sports, right? 4%. But that's okay, because you know what? He's going to use college, or she's going to use college, to get to the next level. 0.9% of all the freshmen that are currently in high school right now, roughly 0.9, less than 1%, will play pro sports and get the shoe contracts. Unless I have a really big mouth and I go on ESPN all the time calling out other pro basketball players and stuff like that, then maybe my kid will get his own shoe contract that I made, right? Come on. It can't be about that. Because here's why. Numbers are a little small, but you might be able to see them. Oh, equestrian. So George, you're good, man. Right? The other one that somebody pointed out was I'm sorry, it's fencing. That's right. Fencing, 38.2. Fencing. I had somebody in a talk one time go, I'm putting my kid in fencing. Right? Those were the numbers for women, right? The chances of them competing in college. And look, it's across the board. It's not just Division I, which is the other belief. Oh, my kid's got to go Division I. Kid needs to go where they belong and where they can prosper and develop. Boys, not much different. Fencing's only 29% for the boys. But you can see, unfortunately, that one rings true. That's the one that hurts me. It's gymnastics, because they specialize very, very early and they got 19%. But the rest of us, we're lagging, right? And look, when you start to talk about Division I, look where the numbers drop. But here's the thing. Great. I had a parent say, don't worry. My kid is going to get that scholarship. 53 kids at that club got him. I said, yes. Ask them how much money they got. The average is $10,000. And my daughter is 19, and when she's done with her year off or whatever, she's talking about going back to school. I would love to find a school that's only $10,000 a year. Well, thank goodness California has this deal where your first 2 years or first 2 semesters of community college are free. And I was like, kiddo, and she goes, dude, I'm doing community college and I'm getting as many electives out of the way as I can, so when I go to the real thing, I'm not paying as much. I said, oh, thank you, you're smart. Right? $10,000. That's all they get. But here's the thing. It's skewed again by the big sports where there are full rides, where a kid can kick the ball out of the back of the end zone in high school football, and they go, you get a full ride, so you do that in the college game. But if you look at all the other sports, what happens is, coming from my sport, soccer, the coach is given a lump of money by the school. And now that coach, she's told, spread it out among all your athletes. That's all you're getting. So when you talk to the college coaches, they say, oh, I love those multi-activity kids, the ones that are in theater and the ones that are in writing and the ones that are on tech team and the ones that are playing soccer and football and, or whatever, because I can lump out money to them. Oh, you've got this stuff and you have high grades? Oh, I'm going to go get you all these scholarships from all those pieces of the puzzle and Pell Grants and everything else, and then I'm only going to give you $1,000 and you're going to get a full ride. And that's where the bragging comes on. She got a full ride to that school. Our club did that. She only got $1,000. She earned herself that full ride with all the other stuff she did. I've also talked to those athletes who said, oh yeah, I signed with that school, but it didn't have anything to do with the club I played for. They didn't help me go through the recruiting process. I was reaching out to coaches and emailing them and sending them my stuff. And oh, by the way, I got on this committee that allowed me to blah, blah, blah. The athletes are out doing it themselves because the parents are so driven. But again, they're driven. Why? Because they think that's the end. We're better off taking the money that we at 8 years old and saying, here's $1,000 every year into a college fund. At least it's going to pay us back a little bit. So we see what the 3 myths are. What are those 3 myths, and how we as adults, and again, this is me because I've told you my bad stories, how do we create this danger zone for our kids in youth sports? How do we pull them out of the center with the things we do? Well, if you read Timothy Galway's work in Inner Game of Tennis, he talks about performance being basically potential minus interference. But we add in the idea of behavior, because the kids do have to take some ownership, right? So the idea is the moment that he steps on the field, he's got all the potential in the world, right? But it also is coupled with his behavior of whether he wants to be there, work hard, all those other things. What takes away from his performance in any given game is the interference of the world around him. The pressure, the psychology, the words being yelled in by parents from the top of the rink, the parent who's holding $5 bills over the glass saying, score goals, you get this. That's all starting to create interference in the brains of our children. And if you know children, So that's John O'Sullivan's daughter. It was taken back a couple years back. And he says she makes 3 mistakes, but I can only catch 2 still. Every time I watch it, I try to find a third. But he said she made 3 mistakes in that song. What was missing during that recital? We know kids. We know kids in youth sports. What was missing during that recital? Who yelling? Oh, wrong note. You blew it. Oh, my goodness. All this money I've paid, and this is what you do when it's your turn. Oh, my goodness. Or the teacher running up and going, no, 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 no. Let me put your finger where it belongs. Right there, right there. Press that one. Ah, that's perfect. Or get out of there. Mikey, get on the piano for her. Get on my bench if that's all you're going to do for me today. Right? Yet I've heard coaches say that. You're useless today. If this is how you're going to play, you can stay on my bench till you figure it out. How are they going to figure it out from the bench? Well, okay, I've learned to be a really good sitter. Right? It's missing. Oh no, but that's okay. Those are the toxic ones. Not everybody's toxic. Sometimes we're very well-meaning.
Obby, get back to the middle. Hey, there we go. There we go. Get that ball, Caitlin. Get the ball, Keep going. There you go. Go to the middle.
They just scored another goal, but I figured Forrest would like this better.
There you go.
I got it.
It's like a cheerleader on crack.
He called her a cheerleader on crack at the end there. So what if at the piano recital, we all acted like that? Like, it's not even the negative stuff. Was she negative? Was she toxic? Did she call her kid an idiot? Or what are you doing? What are you thinking? I heard that all the time. What are you thinking? Probably nothing, because they're trying to play and they're hopefully in flow, but you just pulled them out, so. No, she was actually well-meaning. But if we were at a piano recital and we were screaming that stuff, right? You take those notes and you go all the way to the end of the song, right? Go, 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 go. Our kid would probably stop and go, can you just please stop? But that's what they hear. They hear the words lobbed in from us as coaches, joysticking them, and they hear the words lobbed in from the parents from the side. And even though she's very well-meaning, it's interference to them, because the human brain, especially children, can maybe do 2 things at once. But we're giving them all these signs. Coach is saying something. Referee's giving them instructions. Parents, 10 parents are yelling things. Kids from the other team, teammates yelling things. The brain is telling them things, because they got their own little voices in their head that they've learned from us adults. And it's all interference, and they can't perform. And it's why the silent weekends, as weird as those sound, is trying to get us to realize that we don't have to be completely silent, but we have to let them have the experience. My dad used to always yell, shoot, from the sidelines, shoot. And he'd say, please don't do that. It's the dirtiest word in sports. Because then their brain just, amygdala, right? This, when you yell that, just let them have that moment. And I'll give you an example of what that interference looks like, though. Oh, and by the way, full disclosure, we found her. We knew one day it would happen where we'd actually find her. John spoke at a club, and the director came up afterward and said, she's in my club. She never meant anything wrong about it. And the reason I know that is because my mom was the same way. My mom, the parents on our team when I was growing up actually jokingly bought shin guards one time and turned them around, because my mom would run up and down the side of the field going, kick it, kick it, kick it. And they were joking that she kept kicking them while she was trying to fake kick the ball. So my mom's like, hey, that video hurts. I'm like, sorry, Mom. But we do that. Even my own dad, who knew better as a coach, would yell it to or he'd give instructions. They'd go, it's like hearing you in stereo, Coach Reed. You're over here talking and your dad's saying the same thing. I'm like, maybe both of us just need to stop talking, right? Let me give you an example of interference. We're going to do a thing called the Stroop test real quickly. And the Stroop test, okay, we got plenty of time. Stroop test is one of the most used psychological resources. It was developed in the 30s, I believe. It was actually German in origin, but an American researcher did a lot more research on it, so it became the Stroop test. And what it shows is the interference we cause on the brain when we add in extra stimuli during a concentration task, a highly evolved task, which is what we're doing when we're playing sports. There's a lot that's happening, right? And they're trying to think through everything. So what I'll do is I'll toss up there a slide of a bunch of color words. And all I want you to do is read from left to right and left to right all the way down all the rows until you finish over in this corner over here. Read them as fast as you can, the color words, out loud as you can so I can hear you, so I can count for you. Are you ready? Get set. Go. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. Go. 12 seconds. That's great because I usually get around 14, so you're faster than everybody else. You're the record breakers on that one. Pretty easy, right? That's true. You're so smart. You're so good at this. It's very true. So I did this with a group in Nebraska a while back, and I said, pretty easy, right? And somebody goes, no, man, that was really tough. The person next to me was on a different color. I can see why that's interference. I went, well, wait, that's just the baseline. I just baselined you on that one. The next part of the test is where it gets really tough. I'm going to toss up the same words, so you can memorize them if you want. I want you to read the word, not tell me the color. Read the word, not tell me the color of that word. Read the word. Same thing, left to right. There'll be words up here, but they'll be in different colors. Don't tell me the color of the word. Tell me the word. So green is not, right? Green is green there. You ready? Go. So really close to the last one, right? About 15. All right? Oops, went wrong way. Now, I'm going to go through one more time. Tell me the color. Tell me the color. You ready? Go. There we All right, so I think you get the point, right? We hit like almost 30 seconds. So here's the thing, and the reason why usually I just show one, but I got it wrong when I first told you, and I realized it after you started, and I went, that's okay, we'll do it again anyway. See, the brain can actually process the word itself faster than the color. So you process the word, you know that's purple. But then you try to figure out, oh wait, no, that's green. The brain has to slow down. The brain can't do two things at once. It's either got to read the word or figure out the color. So when it's presented with multiple stimuli, the brain goes, whoa, everybody slow down, let's take our time and get this right. And there's also a little bit of discrepancy, a conflict bias happening in the brain because the brain's like, no, that word is definitely purple, but it wants to say green. And so it's struggling with what to say and how to do it. So it was really hard for you. Some of you laughed, some of you were, hey, you having trouble back there, right? You're making fun of it. Imagine being a kid during a game and getting a set of instructions from coach, a set of instructions from teammates, and a set of instructions from parent way up in the rafters. You got 3 sets of instructions. Which one do you do? And that's where the interference comes in on our kids. Does that make sense to you all? Pretty good test. If you want to try it, it's online. You look up Stroop test. They've got it online. It's really fascinating because the brain is just a computer. And so the brain processes information. And the thing is, everybody says, oh, I can multitask. I can do those 2 things at once, but not even us adults can. See, the brain is a computer, and it has to allocate memory resources or active resources to the most priority, the a priori thing that's occurring. So you can't actually multitask and do 2 things at one time because all the resources need to be given to one at any given time, even though you're doing 2 things. How do we know this? Have you ever written an email and talked on the phone at the same time? Have you ever ended up writing in the email what was happening on the phone or saying on the phone what you were reading in the email? That's because your brain's going, oh, he's writing. Go over here. We put all the resources over here. Wait, somebody said something. Go over here and listen to the call. Put all the resources. Oh, wait, all the memory. Go over here. It's just allocating resources back and forth like a computer. And what happens to a computer when you have a bunch of windows open and a bunch of processes running? It slows down. That's what's happening to our kids. We want them to perform very highly skilled activities in a dynamic environment with a lot happening, with a lot of instructions coming, and when they do it really slowly, we get really upset. We worked on this all week. How do they not have it yet? They do, but all the instructions slowed the brain down. So that's what the 3 toxic myths are doing to our kids, because we as coaches and parents are trying so hard for the outcomes to make sure the investment was worth it and to make sure that they're highly specialized by a certain age so they can get picked up by that great team, that we're constantly giving them information versus letting them just have the experience. So let's finish with last couple minutes. How do we put the kids back at the center? Does everybody pretty much agree we beat that horse pretty good about how we're, me personally, I was wrong as a coach and a parent, right? How do we give the experience back to the kids? And I'm going to skip the mindset because we talked about that, thank goodness. Well, why do kids play sports? Number 1 reason, ding, 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 up on the board, Family Feud survey says, number 1 reason. Amanda Visick did research on this, VISEK, fun factors, fun maps. She asked kids, why do you play sports? And the kids said, for fun. But when we talk about fun, people say, well, I'm gonna sit around a campfire, hold hands and sing Kumbaya. I don't want to be, we need to have control here and coach them. Kids define fun differently than us. You see, Amanda found that they define fun 81 different ways. Children define fun 81 different ways. And when she broke out those fun maps and started looking at it, it fell into areas like working hard, being challenged, having a coach that listens, having a coach that cares, being with their friends, socializing, learning new skills. Winning was in there, but it was like 61st on the list. Getting trophies, that was in there too, also way down the list. Getting snacks. All of those meant fun to children. So here's the great part about that is we're doing most of that. We're actually trying to do most of that, but we keep telling them you can't have fun. I've heard coaches say, softball, 8-year-old girls, story relayed to me by a parent, 8-year-old girls, they just lost a game, and the coach goes, you're not here to have fun, you're here to work. We'll see how many of them show up at practice on Monday, right? But they were there to have fun, and so was he if he thought about it and did it the way they want it. And here's the beauty, bless you. I'm not giving, this isn't Lord of the Flies. I'm not letting them run everything here, okay? I'm still, as the coach, guiding the process. But if I make the experience mimic what they believe is fun, like video games, they're going to want to come back. So we ended every practice with, did you have fun? And did you learn something? It's all that mattered. If they had fun and they took something away from it, we succeeded in that training session that night. And I ended every practice before I understood better ways to do training with a game, because it's the last thing they remember when they got in the car ride home. And mom and dad say, what'd you do at practice? We played this game. It was so great. I'm going back on Wednesday. Woo-hoo. Right? So if you take and read Amanda's work and start thinking about the things that matter to you as a coach, as an administrator, as a parent, and you incorporate those into the sporting experience, you've put them at the center, and you're just like the video game makers, you're doing what they want, but you're still guiding the process, and you're getting out of it what we want as parents and coaches. What do we remember from sports? Well, my wife asked me a couple years back, hey, honey, you got all these trophies and stuff, I'm sure, from your career, coaching and playing and everything. There's this case we had, and she said, you can use the curio cabinet, put it in your office, and put all that stuff on display. So whenever you do live videos and stuff, everybody can see all your trophies in the background. I'm like, all right. So I did. I went into the attic, I dug everything up. I took days, because I'm OCD, to put it all together, and I unveiled it one day. I'm like, ta-da! 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 And she goes, 3 shelves. Where are the trophies? I don't know. This is what I kept. I don't know where the trophies are, honey. She goes, oh, it's a memory case. That's what you took away from sports, a memory case. That's what they take away. They don't remember the final score of that game they won in midgets or anything else. What they will remember is, as a coach, how we made them feel, as a parent, how we guided the process, and the time they spent with their friends. They'll take that away from sport. Again, about fun. So last piece now. Why do they quit? Not fun.
What are you doing?
Playing hide and go seek.
That's hide and seek? I found you in 2 seconds. Get out of there. If you want to win this game, you got to do a lot better than that. Right? Come on. Get in. Hustle. Now that's the way you play the game.
Now that's the way we play. That's our friends from Hockey Canada. It's not done here. If it's not done here, don't do it. Or it's not done at the rink, don't do it. Yeah. When the adults get involved, we tend to take the fun out of it because we forget to put them at the center, and then it's about creating memories. And we can still create all that by putting them at the center and creating the child-centered experience. So the last C's, the 3 things I said you could take away. Give your kids ownership. We talked about it earlier. Doesn't have to be big, but give them a piece of the puzzle. Hey, you want to help come up with the team values this year? Do you want to come up with a team code of conduct? Do you want to choose which game we play at the end of practice? Do you want to choose the position you play? That was crazy when I was working with 8-year-old kids who, he's a goalie. He always plays goalie. He's 8. Let him play another position. There's tons of positions on the soccer field for him, right? Some way we've got to give them ownership of the experience in little ways at first. And then when you realize that they can take on more and more responsibility because they're pretty amazing little human beings, you release more of it to them. And what we think, we're tricking them, is we think we're just giving it over like Lord of the Flies and they're going to run the whole place. But we're still guiding the process, and they still, here's the beautiful part, because I struggled with this as a dad, they still need us. Even when they have full ownership of the experience, they still need us. More so when they start calling their own shots. They will look to us for help and guidance. Secondly, make it safe to fail, the conditions. Are we giving our children the opportunity to fail? We talked about the road signs. Other ways to look at it is failure is just the first attempt in learning, or effort never dies, or no means next opportunity in sports. In sports, no means next opportunity. Kid gets cut from one team, it's just another opportunity. It's not the end of the world, son or daughter, right? In our household, we started talking about challenge accepted, no take backs, can't. And I would use that against my kids anytime they said, oh, Dad, I can't. Challenge accepted, no take backs, now you got to try it. And then I started having back issues, and my kids, my wife's talking, she's like, the boys really want to learn to surf now that we live in Southern California, so can you take surfing lessons with them? I said, honey, my back, I can't. And from the back seat, my youngest goes, challenge accepted, no take-backs. Yes. So guess what? I got to figure that one out because I promised them I would now. So it's okay for our kids to fail in sport. And as a coach, it's okay. And one of the first things I can do is, like I said, don't sub them out when they make a mistake, or don't call them out when they make a mistake. Let them make the mistake and figure it out on their own. It's amazing what a moment of silence will do in coaching, just like with our babies. I can remember one time my son was really, really little, and he was running across the dance floor at a club, and he hit the lip where it goes from wood to carpet. He was running towards it. Boom! Face first into the wood of the dance floor. Everybody jumps up, and my wife, of all people, jumps up and says, no! And he sits up, and he looks around, and he smiles, and he gets up, and he runs again. I said, honey, that was fabulous. She goes, yeah, because if we'd all jumped up and been like, oh, poor guy, he would have never tried it again. And he would have fed off of our energy and been like, oh my gosh, I can cry and milk this. And she goes, and I can't deal with a crying baby tonight. Right? Sometimes we got to let them have that. Finally, and safe to fail, it's got to be, this is the big one. You have to give them that safe to fail environment on the ride home from the game. This is for your parents. Educate them on this. If you are a parent, use it. I've made the same mistakes, but this is what happens when we don't let them have the ride.
Did you tell the coach to put you inside the game?
Yep.
How many times?
I was standing right next to him.
Are you sure? Because I stood right next to you.
I was by him as many times as I could be.
Dude, you're not getting it done. Let me explain something to you. If you do something wrong, do I tell you?
Yeah.
Okay, I correct it. Or I tell you so you can correct it. How do you know what to correct if you don't even know why he pulled you out of the game? What'd I tell you about that? Are you scared of him or something?
No.
So why don't you go ask him? Like right now, you know we're gonna have this conversation after the game. You know it's coming. Okay, this is part of you becoming a young man. If someone does something, you're just gonna take it? So if I was to walk up to you and just slap you inside your face, what are you gonna do? Just turn around and be like, I don't know why that guy did that. It doesn't make any sense, Jay. You act like you're 10 or 9 or 8. Dude, you're just going through the motions. If you're gonna be selfish, you know what? You have other brothers and sisters, okay? We'll take you from out of that school and give them a chance and put them in a private school. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It confuses me. What's the problem?
Every time I come back, like in the car, I always feel like I'm in trouble or I did something wrong.
Well, did you?
Yeah.
You've had more personal training than any of those kids out there. Okay? Back to the drawing board. Back up to getting early, back up inside the morning, okay?
What did he say when his dad asked him what's wrong? Every time I get in the car, I think I've done something wrong. That kid is trapped in that vehicle every time with that. And people have said, oh, you got to defend the dad. He spent all this money. Sports an investment? He compared him to his other. I'll pull you out of that school and put your other kids in it. What's wrong with you? You just going to take it? Well, he's kind of just taking it from you, Dad. How many times a week does he take this in the car? And it's something simple as, did you score, son? Did you win, son? I did the same thing in the car anytime I saw my kids. And I can remember driving with my dad. He was my biggest fan. So when I was coaching, he'd go to my games as the father of the coach. And said, that's my son coaching over there. And yet, on the ride home, he'd tell me everything I did wrong. Well, in the second half, when you sub so-and-so, that was a big mistake. I'm like, Dad, I can't do this. I thought I was helping you, son. Like, even he thought he was helping. The car ride home was hurting a 40-year-old guy. I'm like, every time I get in the car, I think I'm in trouble, Dad. Here's the thing. Whether that dad means, and he has to mean well deep down, but why it's indefensible in our eyes as administrators and coaches and even parents, and why we need to get them to understand that the car ride home needs to be, I love watching you play, and you want ice cream or pizza. That's all. Let them come up with talking about the game. Here's why. Because recently I'm living in San Diego and I didn't have the money, and my dad called my mom said, you need to be home now. I said, I don't have the money, but I will figure it out. And we borrowed money to get me home so I could be with my dad for a funeral. And I watched him for the first time in his life cry and tell me I love you. And I realized that the relationship he built with me in sports, I cherished that. But do you think that kid will come running when his dad calls for him? That's what matters most. What happens in the game doesn't matter, but 40 years from now, how's that kid going to feel about that relationship? We're building relationships, connecting with our kids when we coach them. And when we get in the car and we do this stuff, we destroy everything we try to build. And I hope my kids show up for me when I need them. Right? So the final piece of the puzzle. Oh, sorry. That was the final. There it is. Final piece of the puzzle, Carrie. And it links to that. Teach your parents to love their kids. Just love them. Let them have their sport experience. Let them do their things, but love on them. And as coaches, it sounds really weird to say we love our athletes, but guess what? The greatest, and I get this a lot of times, I'm an old school coach. That's good. We can work with that. You know why? Because the oldest of old school coaches, John Wooden. And when they asked John Wooden, what's your secret to success? They waited for him to tell them something cryptic that they'd never known. The secret is, and he says, love. He coached from a place of love. And that's why he was so great. In fact, he was co-writing a book with somebody at one point, and the publisher came back and said, we can't publish the book because it has love in the title, and it's youth sports. Can't do that. And John Wooden said, then take my name off the book. As coaches, as administrators, as parents, just love them, right? Just create that safe to fail environment. Give them the opportunity to make mistakes and recover from them. Let them have a little bit of ownership of the experience, and just love them as these awesome little beings who will succeed if we use the 81 ways to make it fun for them, and in the process, we cheat and get what we want out of it, right? And again, I already said it, right? Take something from this weekend. Put kids at the center. You don't have to give full ownership, but let them have a piece of that puzzle and see what happens. Thank you. No questions? That's fine. If you have any questions, please find me, Coach Reed. I'm also at Changing the Game Project HQ. I'm the guy behind the curtain on all the stuff. If you have questions or anything, send them. If you have stories, send them, because a lot of times those are our best, most engaged posts on Facebook, is when somebody says, what do I do if this? And then I put it on Facebook, and then everybody in our community weighs in on it. And so you just have to take it with a grain of salt. But it's really good to get the conversation going, because that's what we're here for, is to keep that conversation going and keep you active. No questions? Ready for dinner? Ready for break? All right. Thank you all very much.